Okay, okay. Just I'm sorry because I am in cafe time, but don't worry about. You know that I'm Italian. For me, espresso is it's the best way to start as better. Okay, so now it's time to introduce the first roundtable. I want to thanks a lot Bob Seiner that will be the person in charge of the roundtable that helped me to organize the roundtable, and it's very focused person that all the people know. I'm very proud owner of his book. But about that, so today we have Gonzalo Blanco, .com risk quality senior business consultant in IBM Ambro, an important bank in Europe. Jason Hare, data governance, information security governance principle. Bob, that's I think it's not necessary to present. Mike Meriton, co-founder and COO of ADM Council. We have speak this morning with Loretta and Dama. I'm very proud to have both important forever today in the same event, the Dama and the ADM Council. And Mike will be able to present his framework tomorrow in a speech. Neha, that was the person in Morris Marks that control is the head of enterprise data governance. Stefano Mino, the co-founders and sales manager about data governance, one of the sponsor of the event, and Mario De Francisco Ruiz that come from Anjana Data, the other important partner of the event. Okay, I left you the work, Bob, and be fun, be. So I'm sure that will be good because we have a lot of material of very good hid in this roundtable.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to doing this session. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's really nice to get to know the fellow panelists, or should I say the people that I will be moderating through today's session. So again, thank you very much for inviting me to spend some time with you today. I'm going to let each of the people just spend a minute talking about their background and what they've done in the field of data governance. So let's just do that. Let's walk through each of these folks and let them say hello. And let's start with Gonzalo.
Thanks, Bob. I hear some kind of echo. I think if people can mute, it's easier. So we don't hear ourselves.
Maybe it's you, Bob. Yes.
Yes, we can play with the mute.
You're not talking.
All right. Yeah. No, I said. Sorry for that. My name is Gonzalo Blanco. I started working in the data management field when I was part of a consultant firms, Deloitte to be exact. Since I started there, I started working within different disciplines of data that range from data privacy to data modeling, and then data governance, metadata management, and data quality. I work on both sides as well as implementing different practices defined by other teams, as well as actually defining some of the practices. And last year, I started a different challenge in a bank in the Netherlands, which is ABN AMRO. And I started working mostly focused on data quality, even though, the dependency between data quality and data governance is always going to be there because it's one discipline that cannot be really successful without relying on data governance. So I think that's most of a quick summary.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I appreciate the quick summary. You've got a lot of experience. Looking forward to your participation in the roundtable group here. Jason, do you want to take a second and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Bob. So I have a little bit different background. I started out as a web developer a long time ago. Before that, I was a social scientist and worked as an anthropologist for Department of Energy. So I really take a change management approach and a cultural fit to data governance. But where I discovered data governance was in the open data space about 15 years ago. And I got to work on data.gov as part of the data quality working group. And there I discovered just how not fit for purpose most public sector data is. So I spent the majority of my career in public sector efforts as a private consultant, both in the defense industry, law enforcement, health data like CDC type stuff. So I've spent most of my time in highly regulated environments and working on that sweet spot between data democratization, data quality, and then also adhering to various privacy regimens around the world. But it's great to be here, and thank you. It looks like a great panel.
It really does. So thank you for being with us today. Just to give you a real quick summary of me, and then we'll move on to Mike. But I am the author of a book called Non-Invasive Data Governance. That's the book that Michaela has behind him. I have two companies. One is KIK Consulting and Educational Services, and that is the home of non-invasive data governance, so to speak. And then there's the Data Administration newsletter, which is tdan.com. It's been an online publication focusing on data management industry for many years. And I'm just going to be the one moderating. So looking forward to hearing everybody else. Mike, why don't you tell us a few things about yourself?
Great. Hey, Bob, good to meet everyone, and thank you for the invite to participate. My name is Mike Meriton. I helped start the EDM Council, was the first chairman 16 years ago in 2005. Early in my career, I was a Oracle and Dun & Bradstreet executive. At the time of starting the EDM Council, I was a CEO of a master data management company that several of you may recognize by the name of Golden Source. It was an IBM spinoff. And the purpose of starting the EDM Council, similar to the DAMA organization, was to advocate the role of the Chief Data Officer, and now to include, of course, analytics. I will be speaking tomorrow at 14:45 Central European Time, so I look forward to participating on both days.
Okay, real great, Mike. I appreciate it. And Neha, can you introduce yourself as well?
Sure. First of all, I'm glad to be here, and just a quick introduction. I'm currently leading the enterprise data governance for a shipping company called Maersk, and especially the highlights of my career in this space has been that along with my team, we have done successful deliveries of data governance for multiple master data implementations. Over the last couple of years, I have been investing a lot of my time into creating enterprise level data artifacts and policies and processes for an enterprise that, which is at the scale of AP Moller Maersk, which has multiple business units, and creating a data governance framework for an organization this size. So along with this, we are focusing a lot on different project and platform deliveries where we are providing support for data governance perspective within our organization. Glad to be.
So that's really great. Great to have your perspective as well. And Stefano, can you spend a minute telling people about yourself?
Of course. Thank you very much, Bob. Hi, hello, hi to everybody. I want to say I've got close to 30 years experience in IT management, and I get passionate about metadata management when I step into essential software since the beginnings. It was 2000, 2001. And during my last period in IBM, when I was a sales manager for that kind of line of software, I did realize that the big tool vendors were lacking on some kinds of functionalities in order to supply the data governance initiatives. So in 2015, I started my personal dream with two partners, and I found about data governance, and we are still here. I mean, we're solving some kinds of problems on the customers.
Oh, it's really great to have you as well, and I'm only sorry that we only have an hour to go through the roundtable, because it would be great to pick each of your brains and learn more about what you're doing. But Mario, if you could wrap it up and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bob, and thank you, Michele, for the invitation to this roundtable. Well, I'm Mario De Francisco, CEO of at Hana Data. And Hana Data is a product-oriented company with proprietary data governance solution. You may Google it. And I'm also involved in a Spanish chapter of DAMA as coordinator for the data governance and metadata management working group. So really nice to be here, and looking forward to the panel. Thank you very much.
So this is a pretty esteemed panel that we've got here of folks that are in the roundtable today. And so the name of this roundtable is Data Governance, the Heart of Data Management. So what I'd like to do is let's go in reverse order from the way that people introduced themselves, and let's go to Mario first and ask you, from your experience, why is data governance the heart of data management? What makes data governance the heart of data management? I know you mentioned that you're associated with DAMA, and right in the middle of the data management body of knowledge, data governance sits right in the heart of the DAMA wheel. So why don't you tell us why data governance sits at the heart of data management?
Yeah, that's it. I'm a big fan of the DAMA framework, and yeah, I think that the DAMA wheel explains it really well, because data governance has one eye on every data management area, as the DAMA wheel explains. So it's impossible to become data driven without data governance in place, and I think every organization is making data governance, even without noticing it. Even if they don't know that they are doing, they must be doing something, because it's part of the core at any kind of work when a company works with data. So even without knowing it, data governance is present in every organization.
And you know what what you just talked about is really kind of one of the core ideas of non-invasive data governance, which is the fact that people are already governing the data.
Yeah.
The problem, the way that I describe it, is it's being done very informally, and because it's not being done formally, it leads to inefficiency and ineffectiveness as well. And so, but it seems as though it does touch on each and every one of those data disciplines that you talked about. So I'm going to kick it over to Mike for a second, because I'm the EDM Council, and where in DCAM, where in the EDM Council does data governance fit?
So Bob, great question. I'll actually be covering this in more detail tomorrow. But first of all, to the way Mario described it, which is an eye on each major discipline within data management. And in the DCAM framework, very similar, by the way, in some of the constructs in the DAMA Book of Knowledge and the DAMA structure, is that the entire data supply chain has critical disciplines, and often organizations are only as good as their weakest links. And to me, data governance brings all the pieces together. It's vital. But there's a really key requirement for effective and successful data governance, and we've measured this in benchmarks. I'm sure this has been picked up by many people in the discipline of data governance, that data governance must be focused on enabling business objectives and business outcomes and meeting stakeholder objectives. And the early data governance programs, at least that we witnessed and benchmarked, they were focused purely on policy and guideline without engaging business outcomes. Often the second team came in to do that more successfully. So to me, as Mario said, the eye needs to be on everything, but the objective is to deliver business outcomes, and data governance that partners with business is a successful data governance program.
Okay, and to me that seems to make sense. Any of the other panelists, Neha, do you have anything in the organization that you're working in? Are you finding that data governance is a part? It has to have its eye on everything, or what is the focus of what you're doing with data governance?
Yeah, no, I think the question you just posed, Bob, that and what Mario and Mike mentioned, we are actually living it, right? Because I'm heading a team of enterprise data governance, and we are working with all the other teams who are working on data security, data integration. So essentially, the rest of the 9 data management functions, as DEMA describes it. And as a data governance team, we are looking into how things are being done in all of these 9 areas. From what we focus on, or what I like to believe data governance, the core of data governance is that it's a field where you sort of define the standard policies, you define the standard processes, ways of working, and then you link it to the data ownership and data stewardship side of the things, where you bring in the business organization together so they can fall behind your data agenda of improving data quality and so on, and taking right decisions on how a data architecture should be and data integration should be, because these discussions should not be only technologically led, which has been a common fault which we all have faced in the past. These are also to some extent data governance driven discussions or business driven discussions. So I completely agree with that. And I also follow DEMA framework. So, and being the lead myself, I cannot stress more the importance of good data governance.
And you brought up something that was very important, and that was the concept of data stewardship and the people. I mean, it's I'm going to be doing a webinar coming up later this week, talking about how you really do data governance through data stewardship, and it's really engaging the people. And Jason, I'm going to pick on you here for a minute. You mentioned that you were a social scientist, and since I've actually had friends of mine tell me we shouldn't even call it data governance, we should call it people governance, because it's really people's behavior associated with the data. So how does that fit in to the whole social science side of things?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So just for what it's worth, I just started at ThoughtWorks last Monday, not this Monday, but the previous Monday. And so I literally have to define what our data governance line of service is going to be. And so that leads me to some existential questions about what is data governance and how does it relate to the other service lines that we have. And one of the things that I found most successful, and there's the quote, gosh, the name of the person that made this quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So culture always wins. So one of the things I like to do, and this is where I think the ethnography and the corporate anthropology part of what I do comes into play, is looking at the cultural pillars of cultural and the corporate governance, the pillars that where the corporation makes the decisions, or the organization, doesn't have to be a corporation, could be a government entity. How do they make decisions, and who are those decision makers? And once we identify who those are and how are decisions made, right? Is it a multi-stakeholder driven organization like World Bank or ICANN, or is it a top-down organization? Or you have a multiplex of organizations. For example, previous to ThoughtWorks, I worked at Red Hat, and IBM is the parent company of Red Hat. Well, IBM is putting together a synergy team to help Red Hat and IBM more be on the same page when it comes to managing risk and compliance and how that relates to data governance. So in a nutshell, I think that governance itself looks different in different types of organizations, whether it's federated, top-down, decentralized, whatever. But the mapping of the corporate governing principles to the principles at which how that organization values data and looks at itself when it comes to what does data mean to that organization are pretty fundamental to designing a governance framework, whether it's DAMA, DCAM, whatever. And I use DAMA mostly, but that's just because I took the test, right? And I think that you can't really do any of the fancy implementation stuff until you have, as previous folks have mentioned, the, for example, data stewardship model, which derives from the operating model, which derives from, data governance. And finally, on the people and policy part, policy especially, that's the authority to operate. I know that a lot of folks might not totally agree that policies are absolutely essential for data governance, but without those policies, it's very easy to get stuck in the minutia of should we do this or that. If we look back at the policy, what was the original intent of the charter and the stakeholders? That, I think, is why data governance is existential to any kind of downstream implementation of data management.
Okay. And so, Stefano, Gonzalo, do you have anything that you'd like to add to this question? I think we could spend a lot of time on this question.
Well, my perspective of the governance initiative is related to the physical part, of course, because our set of products is focused on the universal data lineage activity. So what was funny is that in the beginning, I hear an echo. At the beginning, we thought that the main sponsor of that kind of tool could be the financial environment only. But after a while, we did realize that many different industries need that kind of activity, just because the knowledge of those processes was in the people, and people were going to change job, change role, change company, retire, and with them the knowledge was lost. So to address all digital transformation activities, initiatives that they were going to address, they need to retrieve such a kind of knowledge in order to define how to modify the enormous amount of application that they have to modify. And the one argument that start to be raised, in addition to data quality, is the metadata quality. Because those kind of customers on that kind of metadata needs to take important decisions, such as important, just like decisions that they are going to take on data, what I'm going to dismiss, what I'm going to migrate, how I can transform those applications. And this kind of decision has a great economical impact on those companies.
And you know what, the fact is that metadata and data governance are really kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And I've been known to say that the data won't govern itself, and I have added to that recently that the metadata will not govern itself. So metadata governance becomes a real thing within organizations. I mean, there has to be people that have the responsibility and the accountability for providing that context to the data. So I think it's hard to have a conversation around data governance without talking about metadata and focusing on that. So, and Gonzalo, any last words you wanted to add to this question?
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard right now. Already has said everything that needs to be said, but I do think that data governance, of course, it's one of the core values of data management. And it's because not only it helps orchestrate the different data management disciplines and align them to the business purpose. It's also because one of the things that I've seen in big companies is that there are a lot of people sometimes when the urgency is high enough trying to solve the same problem. So they come with different solutions, which are all valid. So one of the most important things that you accomplish when you implement a data governance framework is to actually help them streamline the way of thinking and select the best solution in accordance to the business purpose, instead of having 20 solutions lying around that leads to different interests, complications, and a lot of discussions that, well, might not end up well or ever if it's not as properly defined as they should.
So I think you summarized that perfectly, because I get the question a lot about, well, how do data management and data governance compare? And data governance again sits in the middle and keeps its eye on all aspects of the management of the data. And so you're going to govern any one of the knowledge areas, any one of the areas within these frameworks, and so it becomes a critical piece. You know what? We're gonna move on to the next question, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to address this one first to Neha, because she, I know several of you are in the corporate world, but I want to talk about what the biggest challenge is, or what was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome, or the hurdle that you had to overcome when you were implementing governance as kind of that central piece of keeping its hands on, all the different aspects of data management.
Well, I'm at the risk of sounding the challenges which I'm going to share. They might seem very basic, but to be very honest, they have been my biggest challenges. And the first one was to generate that level of interest and sponsorship from leadership within my organization towards the agenda of data governance. And the reason that was absolutely crucial for us to do was that if you are handling data management, you're talking about bringing in right data management tools, looking into metadata management, which cannot happen without, again, investing into resources, also into data quality needs a lot of investment in terms of resources, And for that, your senior leadership should really believe the importance of data management and data governance. And funnily enough, it's not always the easiest thing to quantify the impact data governance can positively have on your revenue. So there is usually a question asked that, okay, all of this sounds good, but what is the dollar value which I'm saving, and what is it bringing to my P&L? And we have invested over the last couple of years into different ways of tackling this, and I'm happy to say that trying to bring awareness and sort of tying in data quality issues to actual business losses. For example, if you do not have right vendor data, you are probably paying duplicate invoices, and you're that's money out of the door. So, and it's very easy to quantify that sort of information and present it to your leaders. Then investing into data forums or data governance councils to really bring the business leaders in and have that conversation starting. And that's some of the things which I did. But yes, that was my biggest challenge, to change the data culture. And the second which I faced was not finding the right people who can join the team and really, take the data governance agenda ahead. Because you need, in data governance team, you need a right mix of technical knowledge and also understanding. So those were the
It's funny though, the two challenges that you mentioned as being the ones that kind of jump out at you first. One has to do with senior leadership, support, sponsorship, and understanding. And I tell my clients and anybody who wants to listen that 100% of my clients select that as their first best practice, because they realize without senior leadership, support, sponsorship, and understanding, they're going to be at risk. The second one has to do with the resources and getting the right people with the right skill set. So I typically, that's the order of the best practices that I use. And so it's very interesting to hear that that those seem to be the first challenges that popped out at you. I don't necessarily want to go around to each of you and to ask this question, but if you unmute yourself and you want to speak up about what you feel is the most important challenge, or what is the biggest challenge that's being addressed, as long as it doesn't turn into to mayhem here. Anybody want to specifically go next?
I wouldn't mind because I spent a lot of time as a consultant for the Big Five before I joined ThoughtWorks, so I had the opportunity to see several dozen data governance implementations, and there are a couple of themes, some of which Neha touched on, but along with the buy-in from senior leadership, which, Bob, I agree with you 100% of the time, if you don't have that, it's not going to work. The other one is the vision. Why are we here? Why are we fighting? And there's often a revenue component, like, well, we just have to get more subscription renewals, or we just have to get more revenue, or there must be a bottom line thing here. But to me, that's not a holistic approach to why data governance exists. So there's also the ethical treatment of data, the due care and due diligence about the data that is entrusted to us, right? As professionals and as organizations that take in customer data and steward customer data, there is that ethical duty to ensure to the best of our ability that that data will not be compromised, or there will not be a data release and an adverse data release in any way. And I see that a lot of companies, a lot of organizations that I've worked with minimize that, right? They'll say, well, you know, okay, yeah, GRC, we got it. But we really need to work on how many widgets we're selling next month and what is the market for that. I get that. That's important. That's why companies exist, to make money. But at the same time, there is a ethical duty, just like with other enterprise disciplines, HR, finance, whatever, that we also have a duty. And I think that's one of the things that is minimized.
You're on mute, Bob, I think.
I was to say, Gonzalo, you wanted to say something, I think, right?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add to what Neha was talking about. She mentioned some points that I recognize are actually part of the change management in every organization. So for me, there are two types of organizations. You have young organizations who are more keen to actually adopt these practices right away because they understand the intrinsic value of doing so. And you have other types of companies. There are companies that have worked with a different business model for a long time. So this, you of course are going to engage in the change management issues that you just mentioned. In my experience, I mostly have worked with a financial organization that has been standing there for a long time. And I would add to the challenges that you mentioned, actually the culture. I think that a lot of companies have deep scars on how the business and IT used to work together. So in order to change their mindset and understand that we are here for the good of the business and they need to think in data as a business asset, sometimes it's quite challenging because they try to bend it to or tailor it to cover issues of the past that are actually not going to be there because are not part of the data solutions that are being proposed. So I just wanted to add that as a different challenge that I have seen in this type of organizations.
And you know, my experience coming from the corporate world is that there was always a struggle between IT and business. And now there also seems to be an internal struggle between IT and itself, where you've got the development and the DevOps and you've got the data people. I always joke about the idea that, you know, if you go down into the lunchroom, back when we were actually going into the office, you know, pre the virus and the COVID, you wouldn't see the data people sitting with the development people. I mean, at least most of the time. And, you know, one of the things that a lot of organizations are trying to do right now are become more agile in their development. And you specifically don't see the agile people and the data people, you know, sitting together. I am very much an advocate of getting data people involved in their meetings, at least from the point of being able to listen to what they say. So we can be prepared appropriately. I see Mario, I see you nodding your head. Do you feel strongly about that as well?
Yeah, I fully agree with you, but I will add that the most important challenge for data governance is to convince data stakeholders that data governance people is not to make things harder, but easier when it comes to data. It is,
you're
and
right. Well,
it's much about your non-invasive data governance approach.
So maybe we're using the wrong name then, because we're calling it data governance. And if data governance is sitting at the heart of data management in general, governance is immediately going to be related to government. Government, people don't care how much it does for the people, by the people. It feels like it's there putting some sense of control over us, and people don't like the idea of being controlled. That's
Yeah,
why
it sounds like bureaucracy. It sounds like law. It sounds like regulation. Also politicians. So it's not so fancy.
And so, yeah, governance is scary in the idea to begin with. So getting people to and this is a huge challenge. Do any of the panelists find that the leadership that you work with, okay, and Mike, I'll go to you in a second. Do you find that the leadership that you go to, that they're already convinced that this is necessary? How much energy do we need to spend on that? Maybe you've got some ideas as to how everybody who's listening to this session, can improve how they convince management that this is necessary.
So, Bob, a couple of thoughts, and this maps to the two largest work groups the council is running globally. Two big challenges. The number one, and I think Neha raised it, which is if you want to involve business, you got to talk business language, and business language is all about serving customers, driving the right service levels, engagement, retention levels, and business outcomes. And so we went out to the global membership and said, hey, what's an important project we should all work on together? Number one was help the CDO and data governance leaders have a playbook for building their data ROI. And Neha, that's what I think you were talking about, which is, hey, for my program, for my project, and even for the possibility that data itself can be a balance sheet item, that has intrinsic value for companies, that companies that figure out that their data assets can be shared in anonymized ways and create efficiencies. These are all playbook items. And one of the scary moments that one of our group level CDOs shared, this is a company with hundreds of thousands of employees, said, my CEO, who he reports to, said, we're spending a couple of $2 billion on our data program. What is our ROI? And he said, I could give him soft things that I had, but he said it was unacceptable. I did not have a standard playbook to go to. So that work group we've just launched, and it's something we think is a service to the community at large. We need to help the professionals have a series of tools they can go to get their ROI going. We've actually come to a point where some companies are saying we should implement dashboards right from the beginning, that everything we do in data governance, and by the way, we've heard companies look to rebrand their data governance programs as business enablement programs. So you're right, the word governance has sometimes a tough brand to deal with. The second thing, and this is also a big challenge, is with the advent of cloud and the advent of massive compute power that's now available, and virtually every company in the world is working with one of the top 3 or 4 cloud companies to move assets and capability into cloud. That's often been sort of the front line of analytics and digitization. Vital that the data governance function is built front end into that process. How do you catalog and classify data? How do you get catalogs to share amongst the major vendors? And the council was approached by the top digital companies in the world, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, to build a framework around cloud data management, because if these controls are engineered with governance from the beginning, you can do all of this the right way. And if those controls are not engineered, you have a big chaotic mess in grand scale. And so those things are big things, not fully solved your data ROI. And then how do you manage all of the risk and controls and opportunities of leveraging cloud and scale? Those are big things, I think, that the data governance function has to figure out going forward.
So is it really all about ROI? I mean, I've been known to tell organizations that I work with that they're not, it's very difficult to articulate in dollars and cents what data governance is doing to you, independent of the data science platforms that you're building, and those types of things. I mean, so I say, and I'm interested in hearing anything that anybody would like to say, but Mike, certainly respond to this. But I say, look for ROI from the other places that you're making investments, and every one of those places that you're making the investments are data related.
So Bob,
every one of them.
Amen. When I use the phrase data ROI, the return on investment isn't just purely financial gains. There's service gains, retention gains, keeping your employees because they feel that they like being in a data-driven culture. So the ROI is just a brand for anything that says the data and data governance program is generating value for that organization.
Okay, so Stefano, Mario, Gonzalo, do you have anything that you want to add to this?
Yes, in terms many CIOs, they have on the table to make more, gaining efficiency and reduce costs. And I think that data governance in a 360-degree perspective can help a lot in this.
Okay, I think that's certainly one way to demonstrate the value of governance is through operational effectiveness and operational efficiency. I'm going to throw this out there to any of you. How do we, if it's difficult, we all acknowledge that it's difficult to place ROI. And Mike, I'm really interested in hearing the outcome of your group talking about how you're going to put ROI, how you're going to quantify that. If that is difficult for us to achieve, what is the best way to go out and start to implement measurements of how governance is doing for the organization? How do we continue to keep people's interest in this? They want to know, what have we done for them lately? What's the best way to answer that question? And I'll leave any one of you who wants to raise your hand or unmute yourself, please jump in.
Ask to Neha. I saw a great answer in the chat.
Go ahead, Jason.
Hey, so I see there are some comments in the chat window about how do we quantitatively measure, like, for example, risk management, which is not directly, I don't think, related to number of widgets moved or whatever the business objective is to get ROI. However, one could look at cautionary tales of what not managing risk and what not adhering to a more holistic, not just revenue-based strategies have cost some companies. So especially if you're talking about your brand management, your reputation management, having those inadvertent data disclosures could be, quite a disaster. And I'm not sure how, for example, Target would measure the total value of its inadvertent data disclosure, even though it came from a third party. What is the ongoing impact on its brand? And in general, I want to put this out there. Given that the world is a much less secure place, or at least the perception of one's data is much less secure than, say, our perception was 10 years ago, that is an acculturation, a change in the way we view our own personal data. How can organizations and brands differentiate themselves by enabling that trust between the consumer, the customer, and the organization? And that's, I think, through transparency of how the data is protected and stewarded. I don't have a cost model or a revenue or an ROI model right off the top of my head that I can explain, but there is one that I'm working on, but I'll just leave right there.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing what that model looks like. Because it's almost that people take for granted that their data is going to be protected, that their data is only going to be used ethically, and that it's going to be shared appropriately. Go ahead, Jason. You wanted to talk again.
I just want to answer one point. I think my point is that I think people assume that less than they did in the past, right? So I think, is my data going to be used ethically? It depends, right? So, and I think in the past, people said, "Oh, it's okay to share my data. What could possibly happen?" Right? Well, we found out what could possibly happen. We've seen there's a lot of working groups talking about data and privacy and personal data, and how do we manage, for example, the social contract of data that is, for example, health reporting versus your personal privacy. What is the balance there? And I think that's where data governance really comes in to answer these ethical questions, right? And I think it's hard to put a dollar amount on that. At least it's hard right now. I'm sure we'll figure out a way how to calculate revenue or reputational damage in the future, and it's certainly something we're working on right now. But I don't think people assume that their data is safe, and I think that's where a brand can differentiate itself. That's my humble opinion.
Mute. Bob, you're on mute.
You're mute, Bob.
You know what? I guess there's interference when I'm not on mute. But I see that Mario and Gonzalo and Mike all have their hands up. But since we're getting to the last 10 minutes of this roundtable, I saw that Rafiq Salama had raised his hand as well. And so let's go to somebody who's not on the panel and see what you're thinking about this.
Thank you, Bob. I think the easiest path that I could found was around tying it with the intelligence that is supporting decision making, and the fact that you are trying to utilize the data for supporting strategic decisions. Then data quality becomes of an essence, and accessibility to data becomes of quite a massive essence as well. And then straight away, then that pushes an easy calculation on the return on investments because of the strategic decision making down the line and the accessibility of generating the intelligence out of that. And then straight away, you can tie that back to KPIs that you have, and you can tie that back to savings that you could have done if your data was of a better quality. And we kept banging on the rubbish in and rubbish out, essentially, and that straight away drove the whole ROI piece home. And they were a lot of the stuff was a lot of the senior folks was quite supportive, and became a massive kind of adoption once they saw that there is a massive dollar value coming out of that.
Okay. And so, Gonzalo, I saw your hand go up almost immediately when Rafiq started talking. First thing, Michaela, I wanted to let you know that this forum works great. If we can bring people together and have discussions like this, and I think that's working exactly the way it needs to. So, Gonzalo, what did you want to add to this?
Well, as Rafiq actually was saying, I think there are two ways to actually... Let's keep in mind the first concept. I think most of businesses exist to generate profit. So what are the ways to generate profit? Are either to cut the cost or to generate more revenue. So these are two models that we actually can implement to measure how data governance is working. For example, in banks, the most common is the most cutting cost. But it actually can be associated because the lack of data quality well implemented and different initiatives working well leads to forcing the banks to hold more capital. And if that capital is frozen, it cannot be invested. So the cost of opportunity is really high for banks by doing so. And then you have other types of models, things like Uber Eats. Uber Eats has information that if it's properly managed, they can tell you where you can place a restaurant, with what menu, what prices, everything. And that has a value in the market. So that's another way to measure what is the market willing to pay for the information that you are properly managing.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I know that I am a consumer of that information. I mean, I don't. To me, it's almost as though I don't think twice about it because I know that information is there. And so, before I turn this back to Michaela, just to kind of wrap up and see if there were any other questions, I wanted to hit Neha one more time and talk to you about how are you going about right now measuring your program, and what success have you seen in convincing people that, or even quantifying what data governance is doing for the organization?
Yeah, sure. With my experience in my current organization, and also some examples which I have heard from some of my colleagues who work elsewhere, there is definitely a need to prove your point that data governance is positively impacting, so you can justify the investment which is being made. Couple of things which I follow, or which I show to the executive leadership, is the completeness of the metadata within our organization. Whether we have identified our data sets, key data sets, whether we have complete data definitions associated with all of their data attributes. The second thing is, once we have identified the data set, what is the total percentage of data sets who have a active and agreed upon data owner associated with them. So completeness of data ownership. The third aspect is more basic, foundational in nature, which is, do you have your key policies around master data management, data classification, data privacy in place somewhere and anchored with the organization? And do you have a data forum, a data governance council, which is following a cadence? People are attending it, people are buying into what you're trying to tell them to do, and so on. Other aspects is data quality, of course, the very basic one, but something very important, that for the key data sets, have you defined data quality KPIs for all of them? And the reporting which you are doing on them, and basis that reporting, what is the data quality improvement which is happening month on month, or whatever frequency you are measuring it on. So these two things which helps me understand the impact and bring it to the leadership.
And so it's interesting that those are all metrics and those are all measurements, but there's no dollars and cents. I guess dollars and cents could be associated with each of those, but you mentioned metadata and ownership and policies and councils. And I think, Gonzalo, it was you that said, organizations are in this to make money, right? So these are not necessarily, these are focused on the right things to do when it comes to managing and to governing your data. I mean, we all understand the importance of metadata and ownership and policies and having a council, and the importance of having that set up and checking on the quality of data and improving the quality of the data. So, I mean, I'm sure that there's a way to be able to state what the return on investment is from each of those things that you just talked about. But those are all, if you're going to look at best practices for organizations as to things that those components that need to be in place to be successful with your governance program. Neha, that's as good a list as any that I've seen anywhere of the things that you want to put in place to prove that governance is adding value for you. So we're getting to be right at the end of the hour here. I'm going to turn it back to Michaela. Michaela, is there any other questions that you want to ask, or we can take this roundtable home?
So I'm very happy and excited to have all these professionals in the roundtable. I learn a lot. And I think that there is a lot of activity in the chat. I don't know if you can read it. There is some questions, some answers. So it's very interesting. And now we'll be going to make the group dynamics, and the discussion will be about what we have learned or we have understand in new spins that we have found during this roundtable. Will be interesting to stay and to make a confrontation, a direct confrontation about that. After that, we will return just for say goodbye and explain a little bit about the tomorrow agenda. Okay, I think that Nico can split the rooms and start the group dynamics.